It's a privilege to have you here in attendance tonight. We do this every year. There's lots of memories throughout the past years. I recollect on some of the accomplishments that some of you have made this past year, and we're here to recognize you this evening for that. But before we start, I just want to take a moment and thank each and every one of you for the service that you provide to our community. Today is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, and one of my many faults is that I don't say thank you enough. So that's something I'm going to try to work on throughout this year, but what you do does not go unnoticed. And thank you to your significant others that are in attendance here today as well, that support you as you keep our citizens safe throughout the community. I want to thank our elected officials for being here this evening, as well as our city administration, and for the support that you provide the police department, as well as all of the city employees. Big thank you to Lieutenant Slaymaker and Jill for their help in putting this award ceremony together, as well as members of the ward committee, Sergeant Dennison and Detective Olson. As you serve our citizens on a daily basis, you serve with professionalism, pride, perfection, and you sacrifice on a daily basis for what you do. And I just want to tell you thanks again for that. We will turn our Pledge of Allegiance over to our honor guard at this time.
Honor Guard, attention! Port arms. Forward march. Mark time. Ready, halt. Ready, face. Present colors. Will the audience please follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor Guard, post colors. Port arms. Right face. Forward march.
Thank you to the members of our honor guard. We will now have a prayer by Sergeant Clay Hooley.
Our dear, kind Heavenly Father, we're so grateful that we can come to Thee this time as a police and a community family. We are grateful for the opportunity to be employed by a city that cares for us and watches out for us. We are grateful for the camaraderie that we share in the police department and that we have the ability to work together and to be a team. At this time, we would pray that Thou would watch over us and our loved ones. We pray that we will find ways and recognize ways that we can serve our community better in order to make our city a better place. We ask Thee that Thou will bless the food that will be served later tonight, that will give us the nourishment and strength that we need, and that we can continue to become stronger. We pray for our elected officials and the leaders of our city and department, that they will be inspired and guided, that we can continue to move forward and receive the things that we need to be successful. We ask that when the time comes that we'll travel home safely to our families and to our homes, and that we can continue forward with our police service, that we'll do so with honor and integrity. And we ask for these things at this time in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Sergeant Hooley. We will now have a toast to our fallen comrades by Lieutenant Corey Slaymaker.
You may have noticed a small table set for one that is off on its own. It is reserved to honor our fallen brothers and sisters in arms. This symbolizes that they are with us here in Spit. We should never forget the brave men and women who answered the nation's call to serve and serve the cause of freedom in a special way. We are ever mindful that the sweetness and enduring peace has always been tainted by the bitterness of personal sacrifice. We are compelled to never forget that while we enjoy our daily pleasures, there are others who have endured the agonies of pain, deprivation, and death. I would like to explain the meaning of the items on this special table. The table is round to show our everlasting concern for our fallen brothers and sisters. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their motives when answering the call of duty. The single rose displayed in the vase reminds us of the life of each of our fallen brothers and sisters and the loved ones and friends of these comrades who keep the faith. The vase is tied with the red ribbon, a symbol of our continued determination to remember our fallen comrades. A slice of lemon on the bread plate is to remind us of the bitter fate of those who will never return. A pinch of salt symbolizes the tears endured by the families of those who have sacrificed all. The scriptures represent the strength gained through faith to sustain those lost from our country. The glass is inverted. They cannot toast with us at this time. The chair is empty because they are no longer with us. Let us remember and never forget their sacrifice. May they and their families ever be watched over and protected. Please join me in a moment of silence for those who have passed on before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Slaymaker. As I briefly sat there for a moment, I thought of the dangers of this profession. For the year of 2022, 229 officers died in the line of duty. This past November, we had the opportunity to recognize and honor our own Lawrence Penrod, who passed away on February 5th, 1997, from injuries he sustained on April 5th, 1990. So as you serve our community, please be careful, watch out for one another, and utilize your training. And once again, thank you for your presence here, and please enjoy the evening. We will now have our dinner, where we will begin back here in the back and just work our way forward. Thank you. Okay, we'll move forward with our award ceremony. We would like to recognize our new officers for this year. Logan Brower. Stand up, Logan. And his wife, Ellie. Welcome. Ashley Guevara. And then Parker Swenson and his wife, McKinley. Looking good, Parker. He doesn't have a dress uniform yet, so. And we'll recognize promotions for this year. Cy Dennison was promoted to sergeant. And Sergeant Harding was promoted to lieutenant. Years of Service Award, Trevor Thompson, 5 years. Come on up. Jorge Morales, 5 years. Corey Lewis, 10 years. Colin Carter, 15 years. Zach Adams, 20 years. Zach's not with us this evening. Brandon Anderson, 30 years in October. And then we would like to recognize Brian DeWitt that retired in November. And then we would like our city council members, if they could come forward, please. And just recognize the Department Commendation Awards. Brett Smith, Master Officer. Seth, would you come forward too, please?
I was going to keep Amber.
Oh, okay.
She's fine. It's a room full of cops. He got a little nervous.
Jared Warner, Master Officer. Officer 2, Owen Layson. Kylie Packard. Wyatt Davis. Chris Olson, and David Spencer. Firearms Awards. Sergeant Phil Nelson for Marksman and Expert. Brandon Johnson, Marksman and Expert. Dustin Anderson, Marksman and Expert. Dallas Smith, Marksman and Expert. Clint Peterson, Marksman. Zach Fossum, Marksman. And Davin Nilsson, Marksman. Physical Fitness Awards. Jorge Morales, Superior. Dustin Anderson, Superior. Zach Adams, Superior. Councilman Gordon was going to do it, but he couldn't pass the push-ups, so. Yes. Special assignment recognition. Kylie Packard, School Resource Officer. Trevor Thompson, School Resource Officer. Chris Olson, Detective. Mason Bomber, SWAT. Zach Fossum, Firearms. Colin Carter, FTO. Kylie Packard, FTO. Dave Bowen, Defensive Tactics Instructor. Brandon Beebe, Defensive Tactics Instructor. Austin DeGraw, Honor Guard. Please come forward and get your pins.
On Sunday, April 3rd, 19 hours, a little after midnight, Spanish Fork officers responded to Cinemark Theater, located at 595 East Commerce Drive, for an unconscious 17-year-old male. Dispatch advised the male appeared to be sleeping but was pale. While gathering information, dispatch updated the breathing status to agna breathing and eventually to not breathing. At double 23 hours or minutes, Officer Morales arrived on scene followed closely by Officers Spencer and Hooley. Officer Spencer started chest compressions while Officer Morales prepared the first dose of Narcan. As Officer Morales administered the first dose, Officer Hooley took over CPR. Officer Morales administered a second dose 2 minutes later. After the second dose, Officer Morales traded out Officer Hooley. Several minutes later, Officer Hooley traded out Officer Morales. Officer Hooley was again traded out by Officer Spencer, and minutes later, Officer Hooley took over again. While Officers Hooley and Spencer were trading out, the patient was attempting to breathe on his own. These three officers performed manual chest compressions for 11 minutes. An EMT briefly continued chest compressions during the assembly of Lucas, an automated chest compression device. During the entirety of the incident, our AED advised no shock twice. 13 minutes after their arrival, a pulse was detected. The patient was rushed to Spanish Fork Hospital, where the patient was stabilized. Several hours later, the patient was flown to Utah Valley Regional Medical Center and admitted into the intensive care unit. The following day, we were provided an update by the patient's father. Shortly after arriving at Utah Valley, the patient was breathing on his own and speaking. During the investigation, it was discovered the juvenile believed he was ingesting a pain narcotic, but actually ingested fentanyl. The patient's prognosis is a full recovery. In my knowledge and experience, I believe the juvenile in this case would not be alive today had it not been for the quick, life-saving efforts of Officers Morales, Hooley, and Spencer.
On July 17th, 2022, Officer Marcus Benhoff and Sergeant Lance Rudd responded to a medical call at a church where a man had passed out. When the officers arrived, they found that CPR was being performed and the patient was not conscious and not breathing. Officer Benhoff took over CPR. A few minutes later, Sergeant Rudd arrived and relieved Officer Benhoff. Medical personnel arrived on scene. Officers continued to assist where needed. The patient began breathing and a pulse was located. He was transported to the hospital. It was later confirmed that the patient was awake and communicating with the hospital staff, and it appeared that he would make a full recovery. Officers on scene performed their duties well and worked as a team. It is my opinion that due to this swift and precise actions taken by the officers on scene, this patient's life was saved.
The incident that I'm going to, go over here is pretty unique. We go on a lot of medical calls and we go on a lot of traffic accidents, but this one in particular was unique to me and I think to everybody else. And you probably all maybe had a chance to see some of the photos on the news and the visual of this garbage truck inside of a house was pretty remarkable. So that's the incident that this award is related to. On October 11th, officers with the Spanish Fork Police Department responded on a report of a traffic accident involving a garbage truck that had ran off the roadway and struck a residence near the intersection of 300 North and 200 East. It was reported that the garbage truck was partially inside of the structure and the garbage truck was still running, the tires were spinning, and smoke was coming from the residence. Officer Zandon, there's two Dennisons, so Zandon and Officer DeGraw were working a patrol shift and immediately responded to the location of the incident. Sergeant Harris was the on-duty patrol supervisor, and he also responded to the incident. Upon arrival at the scene of the incident, Officer Dennison entered the damaged residence and determined the driver of the garbage truck was still trapped in the cab of the truck. The driver was unresponsive and was not attempting to exit the vehicle. Due to the impact of the garbage truck hitting the residence, the cab of the truck was blocked by debris and structural components of the residence. Officer Dennison and Officer DeGraw worked to remove debris and were eventually able to gain access to the cab of the truck. During this time, the structure of the residence was compromised from the impact and the residence was filling with smoke, creating a difficult and dangerous environment for the officers as well as the driver of the garbage truck. Officer Dennison, Officer DeGraw, and Sergeant Harris were able to extract the driver from the cab of the garbage truck. The driver remained unresponsive and had to be carried from the residence by the officers.
The officers carried the driver to the exterior of the residence where he was able to receive medical attention from Spanish Fork EMS before being transported to the hospital. The driver of the garbage truck regained consciousness and is expected to make a full recovery. It was determined that the driver had some type of medical emergency that caused the accident. It is my opinion that the quick actions taken by Officer Dennison, Officer DeGraw, and Sergeant Harris in extracting the driver from the cab of the garbage truck and carrying him from the residence so that he could receive medical attention directly resulted in the preservation of his life. Therefore, I nominate Officer Zandon Dennison, Officer Austin DeGraw, and Sergeant Cody Harris for the life-saving award.
On November 31st, 2022, an individual called in reporting that her 35-year-old wife had collapsed on the floor. The patient was not responding to the caller and appeared to have lost consciousness. Police and EMS were dispatched to the caller's home. Officer Balmer and Officer Benhoff arrived at the caller's home and saw the patient on the floor of the home in one of the bedrooms. Officer Benhoff assessed the situation and began CPR. Officer Balmer worked with EMS and paramedics to provide the necessary care to the patient also. Officers and EMS were on scene for over 16 minutes providing life-saving efforts to the patient. As medical care was being provided to the patient, a pulse was obtained and the patient woke up and was semi-alert. Officers Balmer and Benhoff assisted EMS with loading the patient onto a stretcher and getting her into an ambulance. The patient was then transported to Spanish Fork Hospital and was in recovery. I believe that Officer Benhoff and Officer Balmer provided the needed medical care along with EMS to save the life of the patient that might not have otherwise survived. For this reason, I am recommending a commendation for a life-saving award for both Officer Balmer and Benhoff.
I would like to nominate Canine Officers Wyatt Davis and David Spencer for the Unit Citation Award. Officers Davis and Spencer are currently members of the Canine team and have worked countless hours towards their specialty position. It is my personal opinion that these officers have gone above and beyond the normal scope of their required duties. Officer Davis and Spencer work ethic and persistent efforts this last year have made great strides to curb the drug activity in Spanish Fork and Utah County. In addition, these officers are willing to show their canine dogs' talents and abilities. Both have an extremely positive attitude when they use their dogs as a tool to develop relationships within the community. Both Officer Davis and Officer Spencer should be commended for their efforts and also for the way in which they work within our department and the surrounding agencies. And I've attached a copy of all their stats, which shows some of the amount of search warrants and drug fines and training hours that they put in and drug sniffs, but I'm not going to attach that. But I'll close with Officer Davis and Officer Spencer train with other agencies for 10 hours a week. They're responsible for planning and executing some of those training sessions. During the course of the year, they have developed a positive relationship of trust with other police agencies. They always represent Spanish Fork Police Department in a positive light that has helped to greatly increase the trust and respect of other departments and agencies and citizens. These officers always have a team-first mentality. They should be commended for their efforts.
Corey Lewis, would you please come forward?
I would like to nominate Officer Brett Smith for the Spanish Fork Police Department Citation Award. Officer Smith is in his second year as a school resource officer at Landmark High. He's done exceptionally well in this position within the last 2 years. Officer Smith has been observed as staying late after his shifts to play basketball with some of the troubled youth that attend his school. These youth now have a positive appreciation for law enforcement officers and can now see them as people who are trying to help. Officer Smith has also taken his class that he teaches to the dugout gas station to get drinks and treats that he sometimes pays for at times. Officer Smith has also been made aware of issues of the school that require law enforcement assistance. He is proactive with his approach to these issues to make the school safer and to have a better learning environment. Officer Smith has also shown that He truly does care about the high school, its students and faculty. He's made a difference at Landmark High School, and he does not complain about his workload at the school, and is always trying to help however he can.
Wait till you have 30 years, you'll be putting glasses on too. So I'm nominating the above listed administrative professionals: Jill Thorpe, Heather Frost, Lydia James, Pat Nelson, and Paul Burns. So I'm nominating the above listed administrative professionals and victim advocate for the Unit Citation Award. As I look back over the many years that I have been in law enforcement, I can't help but notice the professionalism, selfless service skills, and dedication that each and every one of these ladies have brought to the Spanish Fork Police Department. The difficult work that they do on a day-to-day basis does not go unnoticed. As part of the difficult job they perform, they read the severe child abuse cases, domestic abuse cases, sex assault cases, and death cases, just to name a few, and this is all done behind the scenes and a lot of times never knowing the outcome of the case. The emotional toll that this can take does not go unnoticed. I've seen the tears, I've seen the sadness, the anger that these cases can bring, but you still come back day after day to serve the citizens of this great community, and it is done without complaint. They are often the first line of contact with that person who is having what may seem to be the worst day of their life. They never know if that next phone call is going to be that citizen calling in to report the death of a loved one, and they are now left with the unthinkable task of coming up with the right words to say to someone that they have never met to comfort them in this difficult time. Or that irate citizen that barges into the front office cursing, yelling, and calling them every name in the book. And they are now tasked with trying to defuse the difficult situation with no time to prepare. And they can't hold their own, believe me. The daily smiles, laughter, and friendships that these ladies bring each and every day to the office of Spanish Fork Police Department is one of the many things that make it the greatest place to work. They are an integral and extremely important piece of the puzzle that keeps Spanish Fork Police Department operating on a day-to-day basis. The work that they do is second to none, and they should be commended for their great work and service to the citizens of Spanish Fork. I'd like to nominate them for the Spanish Fork Police Department Unit Citation.
Corey Lewis, Davin Nielsen, Sergeant Lance Rudd, Lieutenant Brandon Anderson, Detective Dustin Anderson, Detective David Bowen, Sergeant Phil Nelson, Officer Brandon Johnson, Detective Clint Peterson, Detective Chris Olson, Detective Brett Smith, Officer Dallas Smith, as well as Sergeant Clay Hooley. Would you please come forward? On July 8, 2022, patrol officers were dispatched to the report of a deceased person at 413 East, 1000 North. Officers arrived on scene and immediately determined this incident to be a homicide. Scene security was immediately established by the responding officers, and potential suspects were identified and detained. Detectives responded to the scene and immediately moved forward with their extensive investigative efforts. Hours of surveillance footage was reviewed, and numerous search warrants were drafted and served. Dozens of individuals were interviewed. A suspect was identified and admitted to ultimately being responsible for the death of the victim. From the initial response through the investigative stages and the overall management of the scene and case strategy, the involved officers displayed true professionalism and dedication to their duty in seeking justice for the victim and his family. Due to the hard work, self-sacrifice, and team approach by these officers, I would like to nominate them for the Spanish Fork Police Department Unit Citation Award. The Citizens Award of Appreciation will be presented to a citizen who provides outstanding assistance to the department in preventing crime or providing a great service or apprehending criminals or renders an outstanding heroic act at considerable personal danger to him or herself, which culminates in saving a life. Today, I would like to honor Ken Prigmore as our 2022 Citizen Award recipient. Ken, would you please come forward? Ken, I became familiar with Ken when he was attending Spanish Fork University, and the night that we hosted the university at the police department, I had an opportunity to speak with Ken, and he had a great thankfulness for what the police department does. And shortly after that evening, Ken phoned me up and he said, "I really enjoyed my evening with the police department. I have a great respect for law enforcement and for what you do in our community, and I would like to provide some services to the police department." Ken is an attorney, and he provided his time and knowledge to assist every officer in the police department by drafting a trust for every officer. And Ken, we want to thank you for your service that you've done to our community and our police department and recognize you tonight. This is a new award that we haven't done in the past. Jill Thorpe gave me this idea earlier this year, said we need an Officer of the Year award. Would Sergeant Harris please come forward, as well as Officer Brandon Beebe.
His dad trained me when I was in Provo. And I try to get rid of him, but he's still here. Ever since your dad became the chief, have you not noticed the ego that he's had? Yeah. Cade, back me up. Okay. I'd like to nominate Officer Brandon Beebe for Officer of the Year. It is my personal opinion that Officer Beebe has gone above and beyond the normal scope of his required duties as a patrol officer. Officer Beebe was instrumental in starting a new bike patrol program. He serves as a field training officer, taser instructor, and defensive tactics instructor. He has assisted with the Citizens Academy and Public Safety Night Out. He has received several acknowledgments for his work on several different cases. Officer Beebe's work ethic and attitude is extremely contagious. He has a way about him that has positively influenced the work environment of Patrol Division. Officer Beebe is a quiet leader who leads from the front and never complains. He inspires those around them by his attitude and demeanor without even saying a word. As a supervisor, he's the officer you want on your team. He's punctual, finishes his reports, does what is asked of him, and is consistently looking for other ways to help. Throughout the year, several officers have commented about his influence on the Patrol Division. He serves with a selfless attitude and does not require any recognition or credit for the things he has accomplished. It is my personal opinion that Officer Beebe has conducted himself in a way that has inspired the entire Patrol Division to be better. I feel he should be awarded the Officer of the Year. He should be awarded the Officer of the Year award for the above listed accomplishments.
Thank you. That concludes our award ceremony. I will briefly turn the time over to Mayor Mike Mendenhall, and I'm highlighting briefly.
That's the second brief that he's used in talking about me talking to you tonight. It will be brief. I'd like to thank all of you for tonight. This is, I think back at my interactions with law enforcement, one of my first ones was in 1996. It was in Provo in the middle of the night. Some people remember that after you went up and down Main Street and exhausted all the options to get girls' phone numbers, You ended up going over to Movies 8 in Provo and trying your hand over there. 1996, did that with a friend. And back then, you changed out radios in cars a lot because you were driving crappy old cars. We did that in this friend's, and so there was radio or two maybe hanging out on the seat of this car. And we're driving late over in Provo and get pulled over by an officer who asks, why we have radios in the seat of the car. I was a passenger, not the driver. And after an extensive, discussion and calling of our parents and letting them know that we were out past curfew, the situation was resolved and we were allowed to return home after it was understood those were just our crappy radios, not anybody else's radios. We were taking them out of cars. The driver of that vehicle was now Lieutenant Harding. So I'd just like to get that on the record. It was one of his first interactions with law enforcement. Things have changed since then. Yeah. Standing up here and hearing the designations, the awards, especially the life-saving awards in a year that still for my family and I still dealing with the loss of a loved one, which I'm not unique in that. Everybody goes through that. But just how important your role is, your respective roles are in what you do day in and day out. Not only all of you who are saving lives and giving people more time to spend with their loved ones, but you significant others that are here, you spouses that sign up for this as well. It's a team effort. You sign up, and you watch that person go out the door, and some days it's some normal work, and a lot of days it's not. And so thank you for your contributions as well. It's not unrecognized by us, by city administration, and certainly by your great leadership here at the department. So just know that you are cared about as well. You are loved when we say thoughts and when we say prayers for what you have to go through. We are including you as well. It certainly is a family affair. I can tell you, Councilwoman Beck, Councilman Argyle, Councilman Euler, and now Councilman Cardin. Welcome, Councilman Cardin. He was under the impression that if you came to this tonight that it was no more tickets in town. Casey, it's not the case. I'm just telling you. Just watch out still. But I can tell you that the support, the love, and the respect that you have from your city is second to none. How interesting that in the political world that we live in, it's only taken a couple of years to come back at how important law enforcement is. There was a year there where it was talked about defunding police and everything else that went into discussions like that. And now all across the country, cities big and small, and rural areas as well, are talking how important your profession is. It's never not been important in Spanish Fork. I can promise as your mayor that it will always remain that way. It will always remain supported by the administration, by your elected officials, because you are a vital part of making this the home of Pride and Progress. I'll leave you with this. My 6-year-old son, Jagger, when I come home and he wants to roll around and wrestle and play, he doesn't want to play finance, that I come home from. Ken, sorry, he doesn't want to play attorney either. I don't know what it is. But he wants to play cops. So be that hero to that 6-year-old. Remember, you're a hero to your families. You're a hero to your own kids. You're a hero to my kids. And that's who they want to be. That's who they look up to. And so continue to live up to that role, and you'll be just fine. Your family will be just fine. This department and this city will be fine. We love you, and thank you for being the best of the best in the home of Pride and Progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, thank you for those that attended tonight's event. I appreciate the support that you give me as well as the administration of the police department. You're an awesome group of people to work with. There's not anybody finer than those that we have within our organization. And thanks to the support from our elected officials and city management, again, we couldn't do it without you. So thank you, drive safe, and we appreciate you.